In recent months, the political atmosphere in the United States has become increasingly tense and polarized. President Donald Trump has faced growing criticism from both political opponents and even some of his own former supporters. Much of this criticism centers on the administration's aggressive immigration policies, the controversial role of the immigration agency, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and the ongoing U.S. military involvement in the war with Iran. Today we will talk about Trump's own supporters' turn against him, the Iran war backlash explained. So, before we start, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Across the United States, citizens have begun organizing large-scale demonstrations to express dissatisfaction with these policies and what many protesters describe as authoritarian or dictatorial tendencies in the administration. The most prominent of these demonstrations is the nationwide protest movement known as the No Kings movement. Millions of people from different political backgrounds, social classes, and ethnic communities have taken part in these protests, signaling that opposition to the administration is spreading rapidly. According to organizers and multiple reports, the protests have become one of the largest peaceful demonstrations in modern American history. These protests highlight a growing concern among citizens that democratic institutions, civil rights, and constitutional freedoms are under pressure, while opposition to Trump is growing. Opposition to President Donald Trump has grown dramatically in recent months. Large sections of the American population have taken to the streets to protest against what they see as dangerous political developments in the country. One of the clearest examples of this opposition was the massive wave of demonstrations organized under the banner of the No Kings movement. Organizers reported that more than 8 million people participated in protests across the United States, making it the largest single-day protest event in the country's history. These demonstrations were not limited to a few cities. Instead, they were spread across all 50 U.S. states, with more than 3,300 individual protest events taking place on the same day. The protests were driven by several major issues, including opposition to the U.S. war with Iran, anger over immigration crackdowns by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, concerns about authoritarian leadership, rising economic inequality, fears about the erosion of democratic institutions. For many participants, the protests were not simply about political disagreement. Instead, they represented a broader struggle over the future direction of the United States and its democratic system. Massive nationwide demonstrations. The scale of the demonstrations shocked political observers. Major American cities witnessed enormous crowds filling streets, public squares, and government buildings. Cities such as New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, San Francisco, Dallas all saw tens or even hundreds of thousands of protesters gathering to express their dissatisfaction with the administration. What made these protests particularly remarkable was the participation from rural areas and traditionally conservative communities, where demonstrations also took place. Organizers reported that hundreds of the protest events occurred in Republican-leaning regions, indicating that dissatisfaction with government policies was spreading beyond traditional political divides. Many protesters carried signs with messages such as "No Kings," "Protect Democracy," and "No War." Others called for reforms in immigration policies and greater accountability from federal agencies. Yet, the flagship protest in Minnesota. The most visible and symbolic protest took place in the Twin Cities metropolitan area formed by Minneapolis and St. Paul in the U.S. state of Minnesota. Organizers selected this region as the central location for the demonstrations because it had become a flashpoint for national controversy. Earlier in the year, federal immigration operations conducted by ICE resulted in the deaths of 2 American citizens, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, which triggered widespread anger and debate. The tragedy became a powerful symbol for protesters who argued that federal immigration enforcement had become too aggressive and lacked proper oversight. Many demonstrators carried posters honoring the victims and calling for justice. The flagship protest in St. Paul drew over 200,000 participants, making it the largest protest in Minnesota's history. Speakers at the event included well-known public figures, activists, and politicians who addressed the crowd about democracy, civil rights, and the importance of peaceful civic engagement, anti-war sentiment, and the Iran conflict. Another major reason behind the protests was the growing opposition to the U.S. military involvement in the war with Iran. Many Americans believe the conflict could lead to a prolonged and costly war. Reports suggest that the war has already cost tens of billions of dollars, raising concerns about government spending and national priorities. Protesters argued that these resources should instead be invested in domestic issues such as healthcare, education, and infrastructure. During the demonstrations, anti-war slogans such as "No War with Iran" and "No ICE, No Wars" were frequently heard among the crowds. Criticism of immigration policies. Immigration enforcement was another central issue driving the protests. Many participants criticized the aggressive tactics used by U.S. immigration and customs enforcement during immigration raids and deportation operations. Civil rights groups argue that these policies have caused fear and instability in immigrant communities. Families have been separated, workplaces have been raided, and entire neighborhoods have experienced heavy federal enforcement activity. In Minnesota, the arrival of thousands of federal agents as part of a major immigration crackdown significantly increased tensions between federal authorities and local residents. When protesters claimed that these actions represented a broader pattern of heavy-handed governance that undermined civil liberties, international attention, and global impact. These international demonstrations showed that political developments in the United States continue to attract global attention. Political analysts say the scale of the protests reflects growing concerns worldwide about the rise of authoritarian leadership styles and the weakening of democratic institutions. A turning point in American politics? Many historians and political analysts believe the No Kings movement could become a turning point in modern American political history. Large protest movements have historically played an important role in shaping U.S. policy. For example, movements during the 1960s helped push forward civil rights reforms and anti-war legislation. Similarly, today's protesters hope their demonstrations will pressure political leaders to change course on issues such as war policy, immigration enforcement, and democratic governance. The future of the movement, despite the enormous turnout. Organizers emphasize that protests alone may not bring immediate political change. Activists are now focusing on building long-term networks, organizing local campaigns, and encouraging civic participation. These efforts include community organizing, public education campaigns, legislative advocacy, economic boycotts, grassroots activism. Supporters believe sustained pressure from citizens can influence elections and government policies over time. But the massive protests across the United States demonstrate that political dissatisfaction has reached an unprecedented level. With millions of people participating in demonstrations, the No Kings movement has become one of the largest grassroots movements in American history. Whether this wave of activism will lead to major political change remains uncertain. However, one thing is clear: millions of Americans are determined to make their voices heard and to defend what they believe are fundamental democratic values. If you liked this video and would like to see more like it, please give it the thumbs up. Leave a comment and click the button to subscribe.